There is a voice that asks more of us than reason can answer. It asks for total trust. It asks for sacrifice, and it is both humble and hungry. Humble in the language it uses, and hungry in the power it seeks. Tonight we trace that voice from whispered pledges to roaring mobs, from the pulpit into the pixel, and ask a single burning question. When does steadfast belief stop being noble and become dangerous? Let's begin with Jonestown. On November 18, 1978, deep in the Guyanese jungle, an American religious movement led by a charismatic man decided the unthinkable. Over 900 people, families, children, men, and women, who had given up ordinary lives to follow a promise of sanctuary died that day. Many were forced, many were afraid, and some held hands. Others were children pulled into something they neither understood nor chose. Their deaths were recorded as a mass suicide, and more accurately on closer inspection, a mass murder sculpted into the shape of devotion. The story of Jonestown is not simply one about a madman. It is about what happens when surrender is normalized inside a closed system, when doubt is punished, and when loyalty becomes a one-way command. This is our jolt, our historical example that convictions untethered from questioning can end lives. But it is not an anomaly, it is an echo. Centuries before Jonestown, there were other flames lit in the name of certainty. In Salem, Massachusetts, in 1692, fear walked into neighbors' homes and pointed a finger. More than 200 people were accused of consorting with witches. 30 were convicted and 19 were hanged. One man, Giles Corey, refused to plead guilty and was pressed between stones until his life was ended. Many more died in cramped jails, weakened by disease and terror. The Salem Witch Trials were less about witches and more about how rumor, religious fervor, social anxiety, and authority can converge to destroy the innocent. The machinery of accusations ran fast and was nearly impossible to stop once it gained momentum. Going further back, the Spanish Inquisition. Under the auspice of protecting faith, centuries of coercion, forced conversions, expulsions, and torture terrorized whole communities. Institutions that promised spiritual certainty became instruments of state power, and they used that certainty as justification for cruelty. The Inquisition reveals a dark truth. When belief and political interest fuse, dogma becomes law, and that law becomes a weapon. Now fast forward to our present. The wood smoke in the coffin has been swapped for the fiber optic cables and recommendation engine. The platforms that promise connection can also magnify the same mechanisms that stoked Salem and Jonestown. Echo chambers, radical leaders, and an us versus them psychology that makes outsiders into enemies and dissenters into threat. A growing body of research ties social media structures and algorithmic personalization to pathways for radicalization. Not as the only cause of extremism, but as an accelerant that funnels vulnerable people into more extreme content and tighter social circles that normalize violence or hatred. Online networks can reward certainty, punish nuance, and amplify grievances until it becomes a call to action. Look at the pattern. Isolated communities, a persuasive leader or charismatic narrative, pressure to conform, the demonization of outsiders, and an information environment that punishes doubt. The ingredients repeat themselves century after century, medium after medium. Why does the human mind fall into these traps? We are not passive victims of rhetoric. Our brains are wired to seek coherence, to lower the friction of uncertainty. Confirmation bias leads us to prefer information that confirms our existing beliefs. Cognitive dissonance makes us twist reason rather than abandon a cherished view. Motivated reasoning reroutes evidence around the heart's investment. These are not moral failures so much as survival shortcuts, useful in small doses, perilous when uncoupled with humanity and scrutiny. Then add charisma. Leaders who understand these shortcuts can steer them. Charisma is a social lever, a way of making others feel seen, special, or saved. It's the story that paints a future and offers identity. In unhealthy systems, charismatic leaders bundle personal ambition with divine ideological language. They reward loyalty, isolate critics, and simplify complexity into a single righteous narrative. The result is often a cult personality rather than an accountable community. And then there is the us versus them mentality, that binary view. We are the pure ones and they are corrupt. It dissolves empathy. justifies extremes because in the mind of the convinced, the moral ledger is already balanced. The ends will vindicate the means. The mentality can make ordinary people submit to extraordinary acts in the name of survival, justice, or divine command. History is not a museum. It is a mirror. The same social and psychological dynamics that burned witches and destroyed villages are active today in partisan violence, extremist movements, and online radical networks. Political ideologies, when cast in absolutist terms and linked to identity, can harden into sects that refuse compromise and dehumanize opponents. Recent reports and research show that personalizing algorithms, economic stressors, and social isolation create fertile ground for extremists to bloom. We see recruitment tactics that are shockingly familiar. Isolate, indoctrinate, reward conformity, and vilify outsiders. This is not to say every conviction is dangerous. Belief fuels art, science, charity, and resistance against injustice. But when conviction refuses evidence, punishes empathy, and concentrates power in the hands of few, it becomes perilous. So what can a person do when the line between conviction and cruelty begins to blur? Here are concrete, actionable practices you can bring into your life and your community. Try adopting the simple ritual of asking, "How could I be wrong?" It's not a philosophical navel gaze, it's a tension breaker that interrupts escalation. Admit uncertainty publicly. Model the behavior you want in others. If you find your social media feeds and friends only nod when you nod, you're in an echo chamber. Intentionally read and listen to responsibly sourced viewpoints that challenge you. When sources disagree, prioritize evidence over identity. Watch for warning signs, quickly cutting off old friends, losing taste for nuance, claiming absolute certainty, or craving simple answers. If you step in, do so gently, ask questions, don't accuse. Share human stories instead of arguing over the abstract. You can hear someone's story without taking on their beliefs. Stay curious. Ask about the pain, fears, or unmet needs that may be driving extreme views. At the same time, protect yourself from abuse or manipulation. Power should be checked. Charismatic leaders and tight groups often silence people who disagree. Build ways to welcome safe dissent at work, in faith communities, and online. Small acts matter. Repeated, they become a culture. These habits are a kind of preventative medicine against fanaticism. Conviction can be beautiful, a candle that lights a room, but it can also become a fire that destroys a house. Jonestown is an extreme example of what unchecked certainty can do when no one asks the hard question. What if we're wrong? If you take one thing from this, let it be simple. Cherish your convictions, but don't worship them. Keep your capacity for wonder. Teach others to doubt bravely and to listen with real attention. Build communities where questions are welcome and power is held accountable. The cost of not asking can be measured in lives. Children's lost, neighbors killed by rumor, communities torn apart in the name of purity. Ordinary people can become instruments of extraordinary harm. That's why asking questions, staying human, is not a luxury, it's a duty. Conviction saves some, but unexamined conviction can kill many.
Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If you enjoyed the story, please give this video a like. It helps the shadows gather and the whispers spread. Drop a comment below and tell me what country you're watching from. I'd love to know where our watchers dwell. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We're striving to bring the cult together, and our first 100 subscribers are the beginning of something extraordinary. And remember, the cult loves you.